It was 7:42 a.m. A quiet morning in Atlanta. Dr. Maya Carter was running late for her first meeting of the day as a Homeland Security briefing that she'd spent months preparing for. Her sleek, black SUV rolled smoothly through the city. Streets, tinted windows, government plates, spotless. But as she stopped at a red light, flashing blue and red lights appeared behind her. She sighed. She knew that sound too well. Another random stop, she whispered to herself. Maya pulled over calmly, rolled down her window and placed both hands on the steering wheel, just like she'd been taught. A police officer approached. White, mid-40s, hand resting on his holster. "License and registration," he barked. "Sure, officer," she said softly, handing over her ID. He barely looked at it before glancing at her car. "This vehicle was reported stolen," he snapped. Maya blinked. "Stolen? Officer, that's impossible." "Step out of the car," he interrupted. Her heart thudded. Pedestrians had begun to stare. Phones were out. Cameras rolling. She got out slowly, her heels clicking against the pavement. "Sir, I think there's a misunderstanding," she said, her voice calm but steady. He circled her car. "Whose car is this?" "It's a federal vehicle." "Don't lie to me," he said sharply. "People like you think you can just take what doesn't belong to you." Her jaw tightened. "People like you." The words echoed through her mind, sharp, familiar, poisonous. He reached for his radio. "We've got a possible suspect. Black female, mid-30s, resisting." "Resisting?" she repeated in disbelief. "I haven't moved." That's when something in her snapped, not in anger, but in quiet power. She reached into her coat pocket, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a leather badge case. With one smooth motion, she flipped it open and held it up. The gold gleam caught the sunlight. "Special Agent Dr. Maya Carter," she said, firmly. "United States Department of Homeland. Security." The street went silent. The officer froze, color draining from his face. She stepped closer, not in rage but in quiet command. "Now, would you like to finish your report, officer?" He stammered. I didn't know." "That's the problem," she said softly. "You didn't want to know." He lowered his eyes, shame spreading across his face. Maya took back her license, slipped it into her jacket, and looked him in the eye one last time. "Next time you pull someone over," she said, "look at who they are, not what they look like." She got back in her car and drove away, and the crowd still watching, their silence heavy with realization. That morning she was late to her meeting. Not because she had overslept or because she had been careless. No, this was not a matter of poor time management or negligence. She was late because the world had demanded her attention in ways that no clock could measure. She had spent the previous night preparing, not for her meeting, not for the paperwork, not for the email chains or the PowerPoint presentations, but for the battle that had been waging silently in every corner of her life. A battle against injustice, against assumptions, against the quiet prejudices that people thought they could get away with. As she hurried out of her apartment, her heels clicking sharply on the polished marble floor, she remembered the headlines, the whispers, the thinly veiled accusations. They had called her reckless. Reckless with ambition, reckless with money, reckless with power. They had labeled her a threat, a problem, a challenge to the comfortable order of things. But she knew the truth, and that truth was heavier than their words and brighter than their doubts. She could feel it coursing through her, pulsing in her veins, giving her both strength and fire. On the street, the city moved around her like a living, breathing organism, cars honking, people shouting, the hum of daily life oblivious to the quiet revolution unfolding in her steps. She was late, yes, but she walked with purpose, with certainty. Every glance, every whisper from strangers, every fleeting judgmental stare was a reminder that she was exactly where she needed to be. She was not just walking to a meeting. She was walking to a moment that would change perceptions, shatter expectations, and challenge the norms that had been quietly suffocating her people for decades. Inside the conference room, the air was thick with anticipation. They were all waiting for her, the board members, the investors, the media representatives. They were used to people who bent, who flinched, who played small. They expected apologies, explanations, maybe a polite attempt to justify herself. But she did not come to justify. She came to reveal. She came to expose the truth. And that truth was not about her. It was about the system, the country, the society that had tried so hard to keep her in a box. They called her a thief. The words echoed in her mind. almost like a chant from some distant battlefield. Yes, they had called her that. They had assumed without evidence, without proof, without thought that she was guilty. And they were not gentle about it. The whispers had followed her from room to room, from social media posts to mainstream headlines, painting her as someone unworthy, undeserving, a woman who had somehow taken more than she had earned. And yet here she was, not cowering, not apologizing, not shrinking herself to fit their narrow worldview. She had already taught the country a lesson it desperately needed to learn, a lesson in truth, resilience, and power. It was a lesson that would ripple through boardrooms, social circles, living rooms, and classrooms. It was a lesson in refusing to let others define your worth. As she began to speak, her voice calm but firm, she watched the room transform. Eyes widened, jaws dropped, whispers halted midair. She revealed not just the facts but the context, the unseen details, the moments that proved her innocence and illuminated the deeper injustices that had been at play, the kind of injustices that only someone with lived experience could identify. The systemic assumptions, the implicit biases, the microaggressions that added up over years to create mountains of misunderstanding. They saw her color, she said softly, almost as if addressing the ghosts of the past. But they made a mistake. They assumed it defined her. They assumed it limited her. They assumed it diminished her. And I am here to show them that it does none of those things. In that moment, the room was silent, not out of respect, but out of awe. There was an electric tension, a mixture of shock and admiration, as everyone realized that the woman they had misjudged had been carrying a story far larger than they could comprehend. It was a story of resilience, of intelligence, of a quiet, unyielding power that could not be measured by superficial assessments or cultural biases. She spoke about the challenges she had faced, about the subtle ways the system had tried to contain her, about the countless times she had been underestimated, ignored, or doubted. But she did not dwell on bitterness. She did not seek revenge. Instead, she narrated her victories, not just the victories that they could see on paper, but the victories that had shaped her character, her resolve, her ability to rise above assumptions and prejudice. They called me a thief, she continued, her voice unwavering. And yet here I am, not to justify myself, but to reveal the truth that cannot be denied, the truth that changes how we see each other, the truth that teaches us that judgment without understanding is nothing but ignorance masquerading as certainty. By the end of her speech, the atmosphere had shifted completely. The same people who had doubted her, who had whispered behind her back, who had tried to diminish her in quiet corners of power, now looked at her with respect. Some with fear, yes, but mostly with a reluctant admiration that spoke of recognition and acknowledgement. They had seen her color, her background, her identity, but they had also seen her power, and they could not ignore it. Outside the conference room, the media cameras caught every moment, broadcasting her words, her presence, her aura, to millions across the country. Social media exploded, not with criticism, but with admiration. Tweets, posts, and shares amplified her story, her courage, her ability to turn prejudice into a lesson for the nation. The country, which had underestimated her, was now learning the truth. By the time she finally stepped out of the building, the sun was high in the sky, casting a warm glow that seemed almost symbolic. She was late, yes, but she was exactly on time in the grand scheme of history. Every step she took on the street, every smile she gave to a passerby, every quiet nod to those who had believed in her, was a testament to the power of resilience, of courage, and of unapologetic truth. And as she disappeared into the city, leaving behind a room of stunned observers and a nation slowly waking to reality, one thought remained clear in her mind. They had called her a thief, until she showed them the truth. They had seen her color, but she had made them see her power. It was more than a victory. It was a declaration, a lesson, a moment that would linger long after the day ended, reminding everyone that true power is not about money, fame, or position. It is about courage, integrity, and the ability to rise above the world's assumptions.